Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar. As the slide says, we're going to be talking about how to make it in the city and focusing on the insurance world. We're very fortunate to have with us this evening Rich Milbank, who is from JLT Specialty, and he's going to be talking about not only that and the insurance sector, but also the Lloyd's Military Network, and giving us some information about their Insight Day and the Work Placement Programme. My name is Lisa Jones. I'm a career consultant here at the Officers Association. My background is that I was in financial services after I left the Army, working for two investment banks, Morgan Stanley and UBS. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Rich, who will give us an insight into the insurance sector. Good evening, Rich, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and yeah, thank you for giving us a chance to talk on behalf of the Lloyd's Military Network. Having left the military myself just a year ago, I thought it was quite useful if I could sort of put my perspective about the network to the audience, building on what Henry Dyson said and has been recorded on the system with the OA about 18 months ago. Henry's background is as a broker, and he's got about 10 years experience, so he's far more skilled and adept at talking about the different roles, which he does very, very succinctly and well. So I'm just going to talk through 6 key points really, just to give you a bit of context, my background in the military, talk about the Lloyd's Military Network itself, talk about a little bit about Lloyd's in the London market, what it is and why it's so significant in the world of insurance. Talk about some of the lessons I learned, some good, some bad in networking and finding my own way through transitioning into my first job outside of the military. And then hopefully cover off a bit about the Insight Day, which I hope I'll see a number of you at on the 28th. And we'll talk about a bit about the Work Placement Programme, which I myself went through in February through to April last year. And then at the end, hopefully, there'll be some good crunchy questions that I'll do my best to answer, and we'll see how we do. So without further ado, I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I went through Sandhurst in 1998, commissioned into the Royal Engineers, and I had what you could probably define as a pretty standard career. I didn't really have a deep specialisation. I certainly didn't spend any time at DE&S or getting any sort of cyber experience. I did serve in crisis management roles at JFHQ. I did a tour at PGHQ J5 where I worked on the Herrick transition plan, and I worked in the Logistics Brigade headquarters on tour. So I basically had about an 18-year career. I gave a year's notice, and that sort of led me through to leaving on May the 4th in 2016. So I've been out of the Army for just over a year. Thinking about my qualifications for coming into the insurance sector, I had thought I was going to go and look to do humanitarian work when I was starting to think about leaving a couple of years out. So I completed an MSc in disaster management. I had an IT degree up my sleeve from my in-service degree. One thing that I used through the system on the back of ICSC, I was able to become a chartered manager, and I picked up a few of the strategic management awards that you could almost get gratis through there. Whilst I was starting to transition, I looked at and I completed the Management of Risk, Prince 2 and Agile Project Management qualifications. Interestingly, I haven't had to use those as of yet as a project manager here in JLT Specialty, but I'll cover more on that in a bit. And in terms of insurance qualifications, for the role that I'm doing, I haven't actually needed any. That's because I've ended up in the business development team. There are real merits behind getting some of those qualifications in the chart or through the Chartered Insurance Institute. And there's all manner of levels, which if you do head into this sector, there's a certificate level, diploma, advanced and fellowship, which obviously help prove your credentials in this domain. My role, I ended up landing a job in the business development team here at JLT Specialty. I was basically recruited to be the 2IC of the bid management team. And a bid is when a company is looking to find a new insurance broker. They will put out what they call a request for proposal, and they'll ask a number of questions about why we're suited to be their provider of that broking advice. And so that'll come in through the divisional team, that being potentially the energy division, the marine division, whatever, and that will be worked through by our team into a very glossy report, presentation, and helping prepare the briefing team so that when they go and meet the prospect, they stand the best chance of winning that business. I started that role in September last year, so you might notice there's a bit of a gap in between, and that was just purely down to the time it took to find a role, because these things can take time. Everything was flowing in the right manner and direction. It was just the fact of recruitment processes take a little bit of time. I wasn't in a hard rush to a mad rush to find something, but you know, fortunately for me, it came good in September last year. So two really good gents called Alex Finley and Henry Dyson got together in 2014 and realised that there was something missing in the insurance sector, and that was a formalised networking forum, you know, building upon the Old Boys network as was, and basically turning it into something a bit more credible, structured, and actually driving us on really quite professionally. As such, the Lloyds Military Network's got three tenets. Firstly, it's got the charitable side. There's something called the Lloyds Patriotic Fund, where about £300,000 is issued out to charities each year. There's a really healthy and vibrant Royal British Legion here in the city, which raises about £1 million each year on Poppy Days, and a City of London branch therein. One of the real values to those who are already in the insurance industry and for those looking to make the move is the networking opportunities. The fact that there's a number of people that you may know from your own military career that are a little bit ahead of you. There may be the opportunity to just meet other brokers, insurers, and just listen and learn quite often, and just see what the other opportunities are out there. There's a number of people that do move between companies, and sometimes having that military link can help facilitate that. It's well, Henry found me my job, quite frankly, so it certainly helps me there. And for you that are looking to transition, I think the fact therein is that we can offer a little bit of help. We have all been in your shoes, and we all understand how you're feeling, quite frankly. Some of the trepidation about making the jump, where you're still considering what might best suit you. In my own perspective, I looked at financial services, construction, real estate, and so on. And I think it was because of the LMN that I found my way into this role. Through the Officers Association, actually, in December 2015, I saw an advert talking about a work placement program through the LMN. And I put my hands up for it, and I was fortunate enough to get one of those places. It runs twice a year, and it lasts a couple of months. And it's absolutely brilliant because it's basically getting you inside some of those companies that are already military friendly, where other people have gone on before and sort of cleared the way for you to come on board, dispelling a lot of the myths about what a military character could offer, perhaps persuading some of those companies that we've got a lot to offer and we're not going to be marching around the corridors. It's got a really high success rate. It's running about 70% at the moment, finding people rolled straight off the back of the placement scheme, which is absolutely superb. We tend to put about 8 people through at a time, and we're just currently looking at growing that in terms of having more companies come onto the scheme and therefore providing more capacity, but I'll cover a bit more in a minute.
How many companies are on it at the moment?
So at present we have 10. They, depending on how the company is doing at that point in time, might mean they can offer a place. So for my own company, JLT, I'll be going around trying to find some sponsors inside the business who will basically take somebody on board and give them that sort of fledgling insight into what the industry can offer. So that might be, with my company being a broker, that might be going into the market to go and see actual broking transactions, looking on the sort of middle office type things, so like the business development side, all the way through to other parts of the business, such as any large business, things like HR functions, the IT functions, which are all critical by the very nature of how businesses run nowadays. Everything's becoming much more digitized, and the tradition of walking into Lloyd's with paper slips, has probably got its days numbered, if I'm honest. So yeah, there's a healthy number, and we're looking at growing that, which is something we'll probably cover off when we have the Insight Day on the 28th.
Excellent, thank you.
So I suppose there'll be a few questions about why London? Why does this why does this matter, and how has it come to be? I think the key thing is London's got a historic origin. From the very, very beginning of maritime insurance in the 17th century through to now, it's always been a place of innovation where, with the skills and the knowledge and the experience, which all accumulates into a risk appetite, let's say, it also allows the underwriting, the insurers, to have that ability to write potentially some of the more interesting or one-off risks that you hear about. A real strength of being here in the UK is the UK's financial strength, and I suppose one real element is, which I'll cover a little bit later as well, it's just the proximity. We're so much packed in here in the square mile. If people need to have face-to-face meetings, it's a matter of minutes in between offices. Hence, it really is the epicenter of the insurance industry here in the UK. Because of the history of Lloyd's, very much the case of it being sort of the origin. If you look at there's two elements to the London insurance market. So you've got the Lloyd's market, which it's basically a facilitation place for where the syndicates can operate. And at the moment, I think there's 95 syndicates operating out of Lloyd's. And so how they work is they have a certain capacity of how much risk they can carry. So the possibility of receiving premium, and that should the risk be called in, as in there be a disaster, a crash, or whatever the case might be, and that syndicate would then pay out the sum insured. But no one syndicate really carries all of one risk unless it's deemed to be very, very, very low risk and very, very good for the balance sheet. So the risks are written on a subscription basis, and that means one underwriter will be the lead, and then there will be followers who will also put down a percentage. So you may have a number of syndicates on the slip, and that's where you get the beginning of the phrase underwriter. So on the traditional forms, the risk was underwritten, and then below that first name would be the next parties taking a share of that risk. By the very success of the Lloyd's market, you've also ended up with the London company market, which is where the large financial institutions can come in and basically write on what we call company paper. So those large companies, so from my own personal experience, Liberty Specialty Markets, they have a syndicate and they also have a company side. So depending on the nature of the risk and where they want to place it, they can either write within the company's capacity or within a syndicate. So just looking at some of the stats, really, so 91 billion of insurance is carried through London. 67 billion of it's written in London. Therefore, that's by the nature of it going onto the slips with the underwriters. And then 24 billion is managed. So that means other markets around the world. That could be, for example, Asia. That could be carried elsewhere. The Netherlands has got a really strong insurance market. And so depending on the nature of the risk and the appetite, and also the rates, how much they expect to be paid for that risk, it may affect or determine where you actually place that risk. Some of the stats, I suppose, the insurance market, the London insurance market generates 26% of London's GDP. If you put it into a perspective of the UK, it's about a percentage, with about 52,000 people being employed through the London market. I think across the UK in total, it's about 315,000 people that are involved with the insurance industry. So it's a fairly sizable chunk of our financial services. Clearly, it's not as large as the banking sector, understandably so, but it's also big enough and stable enough to really offer long-term career options for people thinking about leaving.
We've had the inevitable question about Brexit and whether that might impact London's dominance of the insurance market. Do you have, I mean, obviously no one has the answers here, but do you have any thoughts on that, or is there a word on the street that people are talking about in any way?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there's a lot of apprehension on the ongoing talks at the moment about what that will actually mean for the, Lloyd's in the London market. Some companies are already starting to look to locate parts of their business into European domiciled territories. So, for example, Luxembourg is starting to really draw attention. I think 3 or 4 companies already announced they're planning to set up an office there. Clearly, through clever tax management and where you actually regard your premium has been placed will affect that. I think the reality is we just need to wait and see. There's a huge amount of work going at the moment, and one of the speakers at the Insight Day, a chap called Ben Howes, is working one of the key projects on how Lloyd's is going to sort of, I suppose, protect its future and safeguard the way its business operations will continue. There will be a way ahead, and no doubt there'll be far cleverer people than I at the top working out how to make this Brexit a success. There is no choice really. We have to make it a success. And I know there's a large number of people working here in the city. There's no real apprehension here, in particularly in my company, consequences on the staff here in London. It's just not being discussed that I'm aware of. So I think there is probably a hiatus between what's happening now, our actual exit date, and what that actually manifests into.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich. I know obviously a difficult question to answer, but your insight is valuable. Thanks.
Yeah, and just pointing out here, I suppose. So London market carries 50% of the aviation, 48% of the oil and gas, and then about a third of the marine hull and cargo insurance. So, if you look at the marine hull and cargo, Singapore and Hong Kong, they've got growing industries there. Asia, again, they're looking at trying to take a bite out of the London market's apple and place those risks there. And I guess there's always going to be tax benefits and implications for companies where they do place their risks. You'll see on that slide, there's a few more interesting ones. I'm sure you've all heard about Ronaldo insuring his legs for 144 million. Good on him. And through to insuring the cost of the gems and jewellery worn at the Oscars being around about 27 million, and even as obscure, unique type risks, tasters and professional perfumers, senses of smell, those can all be insured within the London market. This is one of the real strengths of London, in that with the experience and the appetite in a way to explore some of these emerging risks. For example, drones and cyber have really, well, in the time I've been here, have become an increasing talking point. Cyber insurance was invented here in London in the 1990s, and the drone insurance, again, that's going to go and increase, because of the increasing legislation and obviously the consequences about public liability, so on and so forth. So if there's a risk, there's somebody here in London thinking about, is it insurable? Is there a way to create a policy where somebody might look at it and think, actually, I'm carrying a financial risk here, and therefore I need to find a way to protect myself against that. And in so doing, that's the nature of opportunity. and long may it last. For the really numerically literate, you'll see, in this slide here, showing about 140 billion paid out in the last 5 years. See, with the rates of insurance and being about 91 billion a year, it demonstrates where the margins are, where the money comes in. London's got a proud tradition of paying out really quickly. There's certain territories, for example, Italy, where litigation can go, for and against, and take about 4 or 5 layers of counterclaims, and really become slow and quite tardy. But by Lloyd's and the London market paying out relatively quickly, that plays in our favour, because people obviously want to insure against the risk. If it's going to affect business operations, they want that money back in the with the finance officer as quickly as possible, so they can resume normal business. So that's the real strength, and that's a big area, which is claims and claims management, which is a potential for actually service leavers, something which we on the military network are looking into to find out where the true opportunities therein are. Obviously conscious that there's quite a lot out there about the history about how Lloyd's came to be. With the Lloyd's coffee shop, which opened in 1686, that basically became a place where sailors, merchantmen, and ship owners would meet and share news about their trade. And it basically became the place to go because it built up a real reputation of having reliable news. A system of runners from the docks, news coming in, dispatches and so on. And so those persons that were frequenting Lloyd's were able to discuss better discuss based on fact what the circumstances were about those risks. Obviously it became more formalised, and over time, it's become further and clearly better regulated than its very, very earliest origins. Those that used to be the insurers were called names, and so they had unlimited liability. So there was a risk that you could lose your shirt off your back if one of your major risks or major claims came in. And so now that's changed since about the 1980s to put in that limited liability, so people aren't quite left destitute. The new Lloyd's building, which hopefully some of you will get to come and have a look at the Insight Day, was opened in 1986, I think. Really interesting building, built inside out, so all the support services, the escalators, the elevators, all the air conducting and so on, everything's on the outside to create as much floor space as possible. It's within there where the underwriters sit, called boxes, and those boxes are regarded as the most expensive real estate in the world. There's reports of the prime spot in Lloyd's costing hundreds of thousands of pounds per year for 3 or 4 square meters, purely because it has the footfall that goes past it. And if you're a broker, it might be the first person you get to, the underwriter, who then gets to have first dibs on whether they want to hold that risk or not and be the lead. Just to point out a few of the landmarks, I'm pretty certain everybody will have a good idea about some of these. So you've got the Gherkin, which was built originally for Swiss Re. You've got the tallest one in the middle, which is nicknamed the Cheese Grater. That's where Aon being a broker, they work out of, as well as a number of others. The walkie-talkie to the right, that's got Liberty Specialty Markets, where I did my placement, and then the whole spectrum again. There's so much building work taking place here in the city. There's one of the buildings next to the Cheese Grater that's, I think it's about 15 stories, and the plan is over the next 5 years is to pull that down and replace it with something that's about 45 stories tall. Because the real estate here is at such a premium, it's absolutely worth taking that sort of effort to reinvest and develop around the Lloyd's building. Everything's within about 400 metres of Lime Street, so Lloyd's being at one Lime Street, and so everybody all the brokers where they have to need to go in to see the underwriters to go and put the to start broking the risks that they have and they need. Most of that takes place face to face in and around the Lime Street. Just as a little example, there might be some really familiar names on there. For the rugby players, you might recognise QBE, who sponsor the Lions. The golf players, I think Zurich's on there. And for the football fans, Aon. These can be really, really sort of household names, and a lot of them you won't necessarily notice or recognise until you end up having a look at the industry. I think there's some numbers here that I've got. So there are 3,500 brokers, broking companies in the UK, and that could range from a one-person car insurance broker all the way up to the likes of Aon and Marsh, which are the super giants, and they're employing 10,000 plus employees. Within Lloyd's, there's 95 syndicates, and those syndicates are looked after by what's called a managing agent. Each one is basically, they facilitate the bridge between the syndicates and the brokers. And then there are apparently 911 insurance companies in the UK. So this is a really sizable industry. And so if somebody makes the step into this sector and then, is wondering where they may end up, you may be thinking about not necessarily wanting to be in London. You may want to start off in London and then potentially head to Bristol, Birmingham, Southampton. There's insurance firms placed all over the UK. I know when I was looking at the management consultancies, I was looking not necessarily at being in London. It's the same with insurance. There's opportunities the country over, and my own company has got a number of offices located, which perhaps, if you start your first move in London, in due course, there may be, better options for you personally outside of London. One of the key things I haven't pointed out so far, kind of flavour of the moment at the moment, is the insurance companies produce or provide 12 billion in tax revenue per year. So it's a fairly healthy slice into the exchequer. Just a useful stat. So just explaining how I ended up here, really. I decided to leave at my immediate pension point, and I'd been posted into JFHQ. I sort of made my decision, and I gave my notice and decided to give the year's commitment. This was, having so much time was it sort of caught me between a rock and a hard place, because I'd ended up being, and because of the headquarters commitments, I ended up on the deployment teams with JFHQ a couple of times, and also spent a lot of time on exercise down in St Morgan, which ended up actually eating up quite a bit of my ability to get my thoughts in order and actually get a plan going. So in discussion with my line management at the time, I was able to sort of agree that from the 6-month point, I'd really need to pick up the pace. So I managed to complete my CTW and really started thinking about what I thought I wanted to do. And so I sort of cast my net fairly wide. I went through the book, What Colour is My Parachute, did some of the exercises, and really sort of distilled from the, I suppose, the presumption that I might want to go into the financial services, the banking side, and sort of whittled it down into what would best suit me. And I think that's a really key lesson I learned, was just actually you're trying to find a job for yourself, not for somebody else. So therefore, do what's actually good for you. I managed to be clear at about 4 months out from my exit date or my discharge date, and really managed to pick up the pace. I'd sort of whittled it down to the construction and insurance side. Basically went through a whole run of CVs and quickly learned that, changing the language of CVs is key for who it's going to, and also making it, demilitarizing it and basically making it legible to somebody who will have, for the most part, those people looking at you will have no understanding of a military CV. So I was really fortunate. I had a lady called Joanna Murchie go through my CV with me, who I'd found on LinkedIn, and she basically helped me make it far more clear and transparent. I'd landed myself onto the work placement program. I'd gone through the interview program process in December and January, and found myself starting on the placement program in February last year. I started off, I had about 5 weeks with Liberty Specialty Market, and sat with the FI underwriters, which was really interesting because these are the guys that would have to, somebody would come and brief them about a risk, something that, a bit of salesman-esque skills to it, of saying, this is a really safe bet, there's no risk here, when actually, it was a real lemon. Those guys would come back, do a whole realm of maths on it, not as complex as I first feared, and soon, I was pricing up risks within a week, and actually getting it fairly close. The key bit there was the relationship between the brokers and insurers, and a lot of that is based on trust. And I think once a broker sort of fibbed and told a story once, and that's become a claim, that once bitten twice shy underwriter, definitely treads a more careful line. I then switched across to Marsh & McLennan, where I managed to go and look at a number of different teams, which was really, really helpful. I had thought that I would be well suited to becoming a broker. I looked at the energy team, the real estate team, and aviation as well, because the aviation, in this case, somebody in the aviation team was an ex-military Lance Corporal, actually, who was the Chief Operations Officer, and he would wax lyrical about the skills that we could offer, and so he was sort of fighting a one-man campaign to get more military people in, because he and a number of other people there regarded our skills as, being really, really diligent at planning, being able to distill huge amounts of information into the key strands of what matters and what doesn't, and the leadership skills that we've all picked up throughout our time. We've all got the ability and skills to make quite a big impact on arrival. Some of my team sort of found it a little bit peculiar that I had a thing about polishing my shoes, but they soon got over that, and they've warmed to it, and they've come to accept that perhaps if we're going in front of clients, we will polish our shoes and we will look the part. I ended up coming into the business development team. Again, I've worked across all the different divisions on some of the RFPs, requests for proposals. Again, looking at energy, real estate, the facilities, just basically taking the information that's being asked and finding the best way to sell us as a broker, and make our case for why that company could be a small company, it could be a micro cap, it could be up to a FTSE 100 company that's looking, or just testing the waters perhaps, about whether they change brokers and they come to receive a different style of service. So the Insights Day was the genesis of some feedback from my batch that came through the placement program last year, and we regarded that, having seen what some of the financial services and management consultancies were doing, it'd be really useful if we could actually make our sort of case in person about why the insurance industry might suit a service leaver. So the plan is it's going to happen twice a year, in plenty of time ahead of the work placement program. So hopefully that'll encourage people to put their names forward, and then we can go through a fair and honest process and work out who might benefit from getting some time. And my opinion on that is any time inside the tent is really useful, because you can, it's far easier to find a job from within than trying to, push the doors of HR and, networking. If you can actually demonstrate how useful and, you get up and go in the first person, people warm to that really quickly. I think the key bit is there'll be a number of people talking. So there'll be underwriters, brokers, project managers, all talking about their own personal experience of their roles, how they found the transition into that role, and exemplifying it with some of their own skills, their own personal traits, and sort of explaining how and why they chose that route, which I personally think is really, really, really helpful. A key ingredient of this is also meeting some of us and getting the chance to sort of put your mark in the sand and sort of start discussing where you personally are, building your network and trying to work out which kind of route you might want to go. If you can't necessarily do the placement program, there may be other direct opportunities to get you in. You know, it might be for a week, it might be 2. Obviously, those can be arranged on individual bases, but you know, there's definitely the opportunity to build some really useful contacts on the day. I'd personally recommend trying to do the tour if you are coming along on the day, just to get a bit of context. Really, it's easy to sort of explain the very, very basics, but when you see how it actually works in practice and how people sort of go about their daily business as brokers and underwriters, I think it gives you sort of the honest flavour of how the transactional part of insurance works. And it's very, very people orientated. You know, it's about building relations, working out who the key stakeholders are, you know, a bit of charm and the ability to be a salesperson if you're a broker, and also being a brilliant judge of character as well if you're on the other side, potentially carrying those risks. It's hosted at Excel Caitlin, and at the moment we've got about 100 people coming, which is absolutely fantastic.
There's a couple of questions that have come in, Rich, about the well, the Insight Day and the work placement program, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Someone asks if they can't attend the Insight Day. Obviously, you say that they're twice a year. So when is the next one? Not necessarily an exact date, but broadly speaking, is it in 6 months' time or?
Yeah, I think we've penciled it in for November. It's not. There's certainly no barrier to you putting your name forward to the work placement program if you cannot make the in the Insight Day. It's not a pre-qualification. You don't need to have shown face there. It's just it's another opportunity for you to come and have a look close hand. And you know, if you are really, really serious about putting your name forward for that program, you know, we'll make there's a batch of us that are going to start helping to meet people and chat and sort of in effect vet the candidates coming through. So there'll be a chance for people to arrange to meet us, and you know, it's a modern day and age. We can use Skype, we can do phone interviews and chat, and just you know start answering some of your questions. So yeah, if you can't make the day, don't fret too much, but it would be good to make it if you can.
Another question is just around the work placement program, and is there a kind of restriction on whether people need to still be serving or whether they can have left? And if they have left, does it matter how long ago they left, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a really fair question. We recently hosted somebody who had left the army about 2 years ago and was looking at a change of careers. His first footfall wasn't quite what he thought it would be, and so he decided to swing across to insurance. So he came on board here actually at JLT for a month. The placement program isn't paid, and so if people can do it whilst they're still serving, that's beneficial to them, clearly to the pocket. But if you know on a case, you know, we'll discuss sort of the circumstances with each person on a case-by-case basis. You know, the dates can flex, you know, a week left or right, depending on people's prior commitments, but we try to have it running as almost a package so that the characters and persons on the scheme at that time can get together and just sort of talk about their sort of shared experience today. Because I suppose it is quite daunting, and we've sort of found real benefit in being able to, you know, catch up and have a drink and just talk through what we'd learned, you know, what opportunities we'd heard of. You know, a couple of people of mine had heard a couple of things happening at one firm, so you know we were able to sort of start looking that way, and it's a chance to share the experience. So We do try to bundle it as, twice a year, but there is a little bit of wriggle room around that.
And in terms of the work placement programme, are there specific dates for that at the moment?
So we're looking, I think from the top of my head, we're looking at the 4th of September being the start of the next run. And I think that goes through to 27 October off the top of my head. But again, depending on which company you go into, when I went through mine, I was expecting 4 weeks in each company and ended up with 5 weeks. So there's a bit of flexibility. I suppose we sort of ask that people to, or for those persons coming through it, just to give us a little bit of flexibility, because sometimes nailing it down happens on the Friday before, because it's a corporate environment and people waiting for sign off and just confirmatory sort of permissions. So so Norm, at the moment we've had 8 people on the last batch, and I think 6 of those have just found roles. So it's looking pretty healthy. I myself, I don't think I was a brilliant networker. I found it quite intimidating in a way, and I think it's sort of axiomatic. In the military, you don't sort of walk around bigging yourself up, saying you're brilliant, because that's just not how we think. We're team players. But networking in business is the absolute norm. People spend a serious amount or significant amount of time just building their internal networks, getting to know people, learning, sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know, especially so in the insurance industry. And so don't be afraid of it. You have to put yourself forward and you have to be amongst it. I think one thing that having interviewed people and given my time up, I've sort of learned it I've seen it from the other side now as well. One thing, if somebody's given up their time to meet you, just be prepared and be punctual, and just have done a little bit of prep on who that person is, who they work for, what they might be able to offer you as advice or whatever. I'm not expecting the nth degree of intelligence prep, but just a little bit of wherewithal goes a long way. And kind of treat it like a mini interview, because you never know, that person might have something up their sleeve. And I've had a couple of meetings where I've sort of been in that circumstance, and actually there was that ability to sort of pass somebody's number across or whatever. So just always put your best foot forward, I think, would be my plea. A lesson I didn't really pick up until I was nearly through the placement program. If you're meeting somebody, try to leave that meeting with another 2 people's contact details to meet, to get in touch with, and try to grow your network as you go. There are a lot of dead ends in networking, but at some point there will be that one absolute gem that through a bit of perseverance and a bit of thoroughness you'll find, which will open that door for you. If there's any possibility of getting a work placement, put your hand up and be as keen as mustard to get on it, because the experience I've seen so far is people inside businesses stand a far better chance of getting a role, or being considered for something, than those cold calling, sending emails in, emailing CVs into HR departments. It's just the reality. If you're there and present, actually people recognise you for being, a good, strong character, and they'll ask, if they like you, they'll ask their peers, their colleagues, if they've got any opportunities. And so if anything's on offer, any sector, just take it, and it's helping thicken out your CV as well, demonstrating you're getting ready for sort of corporate life. Maybe my own pet hate, but if somebody's giving you their time, just be courteous and follow up and thank them. And if there's anything left hanging, if you've got a chance to ask a question to encourage that conversation back, and keep that channel going, do so, because simple courtesy can carry the day. And also, people are really busy, so you just want to stay at the front of their minds. LinkedIn is a tool. Use it judiciously, wisely. Cold calling, seldom works. People are, going to have to give up a bit of their precious time, and so they're going to be very, very select. And also, like sending in your CVs to HR departments, it can get you down. You're playing in. My personal opinion is you're playing a bit of a game here, and you've got to keep your morale up at every turn. And keep your optimism going. You will find a role, but there are certain things that will wear you down quite quickly. Where you've submitted, a number of CVs with no reply or response, it can be really downheartening. I think if we go to the next slide, I can take those questions.
No, I think thank you very much for all of that, Rich, because I think that you've given some really good messages there to people, both about their CVs and also about networking. So I think that's good stuff for people to take away there. Perhaps some of that will translate into kind of lead on, if you like, to one of the questions, which is about the skills that you feel made you a successful applicant on the work placement program. So obviously you explained at the beginning that you didn't have any particular qualifications that might have attracted them to you. But I mean, I know from listening to you, you mentioned planning, prioritizing, your leadership ability,
yeah,
and also the ability to build relationships. Would you say those four were the key ones, or are there other skills that you think that make people from the military particularly good in your world?
I think from my own experience, it's been the can-do approach that most military people come with, in the fact that if you're told to do something, you'll find a way to get it done. And if you're told to deliver something by a deadline, you do it. I think that's that all boils down to time management, an element of respect for authority, which is a kind of peculiar thing to point out, but I think it actually stands us in really good stead. I think the fact that because of the nature of the organisation we come from, and where it's a winning type environment, you need to have some of those skills, which are it's exactly that, the ability to plan, to think, to process data and information, picking out the key facts. Building relationships is key. Working out how to build your network both inside the company and across the sectors is really useful. And those all, for the most part, those are all second nature to military people. There's quite an element of trepidation about what a military person might mean when you join a team. I think they were expecting us to be bombastic and marching up and down the corridor, and I think that sort of 1950s view of the military is really antidated or outdated. And actually, we've got so much to offer that when you can step into a company that doesn't necessarily have rigid structures where you have to have had certain qualifications just to get a foot in the door, you can really excel. And sometimes that you can create your own opportunities by being can-do.
That's great, thank you, Rick. If people were particularly keen on getting actual qualifications, is there any merit in that? And if so, do you recommend anything that people could use their learning credits or whatever to pursue?
Yeah, well, at the start I mentioned about the 3 qualifications I did on leaving, and to date I haven't had to use them. So I think it was quite useful for me to have on my CV, because it formally demonstrated that I had some project management skills. The fact that I haven't used them, it's a different matter by the very nature of just being able to plan logically for sort of the low-level project management I've had to do here. I think the there is talk about, for those persons coming through the placement program in the future, to do some of the CII qualifications, and that would really help you be well prepared and credible as well. It also shows a certain element of commitment and hunger to win a role. If you can demonstrate that you're already studying for a cert CII, that will go some way. And unsurprisingly, or not surprisingly, the companies will pay for those qualifications because it's continual sort of personal development, which is great. From my own experience, if I was going to change what I'd done, I'd probably stick with the fact that I got those qualifications, because it actually helped with my confidence as well coming into a company. Just having some of those skills up my sleeve, I thought would actually be quite useful. Should I suddenly find myself, front and center running a large project team, I thought that'd be quite useful just to have those skills.
That's great, thank you, Rich. Someone has asked about the age profile of people in the insurance industry. Is there such a thing, and are there age barriers, or do you find that it's full of people from all different backgrounds?
That's a really, really good point, because I and one of my predecessors, we were, Ben was a lieutenant colonel, and I was a senior major, so we were at the sort of the upper end of the normal age band that were coming through the scheme. So it had been a number of more junior persons going through, with the prospect of those characters becoming underwriting assistants or junior brokers, where because of age and such forth, they had the time on their side to learn those roles in detail. For myself, I was offered the opportunity to become an underwriting assistant, and in my own personal circumstance, it was just going to be too much of an ask to sort of backpedal in terms of salary expectations and not being able to use some of the skills I'd picked up throughout my sort of 18 years. So I sort of stepped away from that. But there's a huge number of other roles in the insurance sector. Compared to any other business, there is change management, project management, business development, all manner of supporting roles. Somebody came in recently and had a couple of weeks of placement with the HR department here. So there's a whole wealth of other roles here that are worth exploring. I think it's far wider than just saying there's broking and there's underwriting and that's it, full stop. There's a huge spectrum, and for those persons that can come along on the day, to the Insight Day, grab the likes of Ben, myself, and we can have a chat and just sort of explore and talk about some of our thoughts. I've certainly found, the insurance industry is 18-year-olds to 70-year-olds, with different varying levels of experience therein. Some people have joined late, some people have been here. Like the CEO here has been here for 24 years and worked his way up from the very sort of grassroots. So there's huge opportunities in the insurance sector, and some of it's depending on the company, obviously, and some of it's not as formal or rigid per se compared to the likes of going to a management consultancy, where if you're an SO2, you are stepping in at a manager, a senior manager level, and so on and so forth. Because there's not such the same amount of numbers coming through, it's actually the real opportunity for you to find unique opportunities. And a really good example here is two of our COOs are both ex-colonels from the military. One started about 6 weeks ago, and another has been here coming up for a couple of years. And they've been recruited exactly for the skill sets that we've talked about, their ability to, delve through detail and actually hold people accountable. So there's a whole spectrum of characters. It's not a young person's game. It's not the voices of experience they're necessarily after. There's something for everybody, I think.
Thanks, Rich. Another question we've had is around salary levels. The person says that they have heard that the insurance sector doesn't tend to pay as high salaries as you might expect in banking or even consultancy. Is this true, and should it be something that people are concerned about?
I suppose it weaves into my previous point. If you're being asked to come in if you're looking to be a broker or underwriter, you've got to learn your trade, and therefore there is that element of backpedaling with the sort of expectant salary bands, that they would be looking to pay you, graduate-esque sort of rates of pay. But for myself, when I was leaving, I sat down and looked at my sort of current salary and worked out what I would need to earn to be able to commute into the city, and an increased cost of having to buy a suit every 6 months to build up my stock of suits and so on and so forth. And you need to come up with that sort of golden figure for yourself of what you need to earn. And it is about salary negotiation. And this is one of the real strengths of the network, because as I was going through, when I had my offer here, I was able to reach out to a couple of people and just ask their guidance on, am I getting the market rate, or am I being offered, below because of my sort of military experience? And they were able to give me, honest answers rather than going into it blind. I know, peers that have gone off to one of the banks that have, again, because they've left as an SO2, they've gone into a certain band in that company, and they're paid literally the same as they were leaving the military, but with greater costs. So that's, a real case of on an individual level, and it is a negotiation. So there is if they want you, they'll certainly pay for you. And if you're picking the right roles for your sort of experience and what you want to be doing, you can push it, and you can do all right.
No, that's helpful, thank you. And I think there's also been a question on how to apply for the work placement programme. Obviously, I'm sure you will be explaining that at the Insight Day, but for people who are unable to attend the Insight Day, will this information be published elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm really glad you've asked me this. In the references at the end of this presentation, I've put down the Lloyd's Military Network website. It's a really easy web address. It's lloydsmilitary.network.com, and that went live just this week. In there, on the front page, is an apply button. I think we're just finessing a couple of the bits on the application form, but that's the way that we're going to try to whip in the applications, and so that it's all controlled in one place. So sort of formalising it from where it used to be, people had been approached, or the brilliant work the Officers Association did on getting me onto the scheme. We're just sort of trying to tighten up and sort of control the information. So it's all on the website, and there's that website being brand new. It's going to build up and up, and there's case studies, and there'll be details about the next networking drinks and so on and so forth. So there'll be opportunities for people to come in and just casually come and meet some people and ask questions. And every single person on the military network has been a service leaver at some point, so they understand what you're going through, and everybody's really Wilco, everybody's friendly, and everybody will give you the time of day to field those questions that you might have.
Great. And equally, if people aren't able to attend the Insight Day, will there be an opportunity for them to get some information about what was covered during that day from that website at all?
Yeah, so we're filming some parts of it. So the plan is to upload it onto the website, and we've had Lord Dannatt talk recently at one of the networking lunches. So there will be more and more information going on that portal. So definitely start having a look at it, depending on how far out you are from leaving, and just obviously build up. I've put a couple of other bits and pieces on there. There is a LinkedIn group. We're just debating at the moment whether we open that up. At the moment it's a closed group because unfortunately we're getting a lot of spam on there. and also just the Lloyd's website to learn a little bit more about the industry and a bit more about the marketing, or sorry, the market. The London Matters report just gives a bit of context on how things are at the moment.
And so, I mean, there was a question earlier about someone who works for a law firm wanting to know if they could contribute to the Lloyd's Military Network. How would they go about doing that?
That's a really interesting question. Because at the moment, we don't really have any costs. Everything is sort of done.
No, I don't mean, sorry, I don't mean contribute financially. I just mean,
yeah, but offer support.
Value. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know there was a discussion a little while ago about how to sort of expand it. I know there's the Cities Veterans Network, which Henry and Alex are involved with at the moment, and there's some discussions going on there about how the Lloyd's Military Network might help offer other places. So by all means, whoever that person is, you know, very much drop us an email, and then on the next slide actually is the contact details. So just drop us an email, and it'd be fantastic to have a conversation.
Brilliant. I mean, I think I've covered off on all the questions there, really. So I think, you know, if people did have other questions, then obviously come along to your open day. Or, I mean, are you happy for people to contact you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. I've put my name out there now, so you know, I'm happy to try and help as far as I can. You know, obviously, being honest, you know, it's still relatively early days for me, and I'm still finding my way. But you know, I've been in those shoes of leaving and sort of the trepidation. So anything I can do to help, you know, another person, then I'm all for it.
Well, I think people have found this webinar very informative. Thank you very much for your time, Rich, and I'm sure that you're going to have a very successful Insight Day. So, you know, thank you very much for your time this evening, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
And you know, keep an eye on our website for other events, and I'm sure that the Lloyd's Military Network will publicise their events through us as well. So
yeah,
do keep an eye open for those. But thanks for your time again, Rich, and have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.